Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's my presentation, and I will tell you the story of my life. So my name is Nitzan Beck. I'm one of the Chaverim Israel this year. And how can I start to talk about myself without talking about my family? I have two siblings, Dutan, my big brother, and Eden, my big sister, and two parents. My mom name is Rakefet, and my father name is Yaron. And I have a small dog that's not in this picture, but his name is Charlie. So my hobbies, it's like a big issue in my life. I love to travel and hiking in Israel. I love to discover the world and fly to different places. And my big one is sport. I did a lot of different kind of sport. Here you can see picture of me playing tennis when I was a little child. And I become as handball player. It started with my father, my big brother, and then me. I was the goalie in handball. I played in the Israeli national team, my high school league, and my city team. So that's a picture. That's another picture after I saved the ball, and I'm happy because it was really important a ball that I saved. And now we will show you a clip that was from semi-final high school league when it was at my school in the Israeli Sport Channel. So enjoy, I'm the goalie.
הייתי בפריז וגם ברומא, ראיתי את שבעת פלאי תבל, בקוטב הצפוני וגם דרומה, אך אין מקום כמו ארץ ישראל, וכמו גלויות של נוף יפות, תמונות בזיכרוני עפות, כמו בעד עדשה של מצלמה, בתרמילי אותן אסע לכל מקום בכל מסע.
Okay, so I hope you succeed to watch the video good enough. And now we will move to the next one. Why am I here in Cincinnati? So first thing is to represent Israel, my country. I feel it as something that I have to do, and I'm proud in my country, and I love to represent her and like service my country. And the next reason why am I here, it's to make connection between Jewish in the world, Jewish in Israel, between me as a Nitzan for other people, and to connect the Jewish people around the world. Opportunity, I want to stay of this opportunity for a few minutes. I made a huge opportunity to myself that it's one-time life opportunity to come to the United States as 18 or 19 years old and live a whole life here and represent Israel and live my whole life in Israel and start a new life. And it's something that I worked really hard for. And I knew it's one-time life opportunity because I cannot do it any other time in my life. So it was something that really was important for me, sorry. And the last one is to enjoy the time in the United States, to explore things that I never had before. And this picture is from BBYO camp. And it was one of the best picture that I did here. And now we will move on. So if I hadn't been here, where I would be. So before this year, I had 3 different options. So one option was to came here and then next year to go to the IDF. The second one was to go to half a year training with the Israeli handball national team, to go abroad, practice, and then come back to Israel and be a professional handball player. And the third one, just go directly to the army and be a soldier. I probably will be a fighter in the army. So that's basically my presentation, and I hope you learn a bit more about me.
Thank you. Moving on. Second.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Dior. I'm the new Chaverim Israel, not so new anymore. And when I was asked to talk about myself, I thought I didn't know where to go and where to start. So I thought, okay, let's start from the beginning. So I was born September 3rd, 2003. I was born by the end of the 6th month of pregnancy and gave my parents a bit of a heart attack. And after a while in the hospital, my mom says that ever since I got out of the hospital, I've been running nonstop. So a little bit about me. I grew up in Netanya. I'm 18 years old, and I'm really, really excited to be here. About my hobbies. So growing up, I would never choose if I could do both. And I did more than 6 different after school activities. I did chess club, swimming, capoeira, gymnastic, ballet, and eventually I did jiu-jitsu and Thai boxing for 9 years. And I was in a dance group for almost 11 years. And I could say that these experiences and these after school activities became way more than just an activity, and it taught me so much about myself and about others. And another really, really big thing about my life is the Scout movement. Honestly, I can talk hours and hours about it. And I would just say the experience that I had, the people I met, and the responsibilities that I was giving really changed me as a person. You could see in these pictures, all these little boys over here, they were under my responsibility for a whole year. And to be given this amount of responsibility in such a young age really changed your perspective about education, about kids, about how you can contribute to other people. And that is really in small bits about it. And fast forward a bit, what makes an 18-year-old girl to leave everything she knows behind and come here to Cincinnati? So as you could see, I was here in Cincinnati in 2017. I went to Europe camp 2017, 18, and 19. I've visited in the Jewish community in Brazil through my dance group in 2017, and I visited Ethiopia in 2018. And my experience with the Jewish communities worldwide really made an impact on me and made me realize that the significant and impact that emissaries and Shinshinim have on these communities is incredible. And my first time even hearing about the Shinshinim and the Chaverim Israel program was here in Cincinnati. I met Adath. I don't know how many of you know her. She's a former Chavera. I guess most of you. And since then, I realized this is what I want to do. I came here because I wanted to talk about Israel and to get connected with people and make this connection between the people and Israel and really do a significant work and do something that is a bit different after my high school and not just go to the IDF immediately, but give a year from myself and contribute to other people. But honestly, I feel like I'm getting so much here from experiences to things that I'm learning about myself, and also this incredible community that gave us a humongous hug when we came here. So I'm really grateful about that. And my last thing would be my parents. If my goal is for you guys to get to know me, I could not, I have to speak about them because they're basically the essence of who I am. So these two amazing people here in the pictures, these are my parents, Tamar and Benny. And I could say that I want to believe a little kid at his parents like Superman with a cape. And that is what they are for me. And that is why I always tried to be for my students, for my campers. I think that is the main reason that I did everything I did growing up in youth movements and other volunteer programs. And that is also the reason that I'm here today, because I would not have been here without them. And that is a summit of who I am and my way of letting you guys get to know me a bit better.
Well, thank you so much, both. I'll pop up for 1 second to the other presentation. Okay, so actually, after those two great, wanted to say kiddos, but they're not kiddos anymore. I got really inspired by hearing their stories and the things that they've accomplished in their 18 years. Sorry. Okay, so a little bit about myself. So I would wish to walk with you all in the yellow brick road of the average Israeli. I decided to showcase my life through these major milestones that I would say most Israelis are going through. So while you're getting to know me better, you'll get to know the Israeli society in the same time. That's kind of the purpose of our program this year, to give you different windows to the Israeli society. So I just called it the Yellow Brick Road. And we call it the Israeli checklist, all right? So most of us going through the same stations, mostly starting in high schools. So I finished my high school in the first Hebrew agricultural school in Israel, who was founded in 1870. It's a very historical place in Israel, and a few big things happened there, actually. So I'll let you Google it if you're interested, or I won't expand too much here, but it's called Mikveh Israel, and it's a very cool place. I even worked in the orchard, picked avocados, and grew oranges, and that was a very cool experience. So after the high school, like most Israelis, I joined the army. So at the army, I was an officer. I did 4.5 years serving at the maintenance corps at the IDF. But actually, most of my service I did positions where I instruct other soldiers, mostly around becoming officers. So about 2.5 years out of my service, I worked with soldiers that wanted to do the IDF officers training school. And in the last year and a half, I was an officer at the officer training school, training cadets to become officers. And I would say that that was the first most meaningful Zionistic experience I've had as an Israeli, training officers. So when you join the army and you want to become an officer, you basically divide your training into two. The first half is at Bahad Echad, which is where I serve. Bahad means Sita Bracha. It's the base where you get the training. So that's the first, it's called number one. In this place, all of the soldiers who wants to become officers go to this specific base and get the same training, kinda. And it's a very not professional training, more value-oriented, educational-oriented course for between 2.5 months and 4 months. So this is where I serve. And most of the time you just talk about why it is important to become an officer, what's the importance of the idea for Israel as a country and the Israeli society. And the unique position the IDF has in the Israeli society. That's a topic for another lecture, maybe. Um, but in this base, you can encounter soldiers from the entire army, which is very, very unique and special. So for me, it was very transformative experience working there with them. And I finished as after I command a group of soldiers, I became a training officer of a battalion and finished my army. So what happens after the army? Who knows? I'll let you unmute yourself if you want. Who knows what happens? What Israelis do after the army? No one?
Travel.
Ah, thank you, Barb. Thank
You
you.
went to India.
Close. No, but true. We are doing what we're calling the big trip. The big trip is a way where Israelis after the army get the chance, kind of the only chance to travel with their minds free of obligations, responsibilities, no job yet, no school, no kids, just to take the time and explore the world. So actually, I traveled pretty close to here, Central and South America. Well, closer than India, I would say, not that close. I visited about 7 different countries for 6 months, and as you can see, different landscapes. It's a very diverse continent, and both tropical and deserts and culture, and it was a very overwhelming kind of experience. I think that was part of my decision to go and study afterwards anthropology at the university, just to travel in different places and encountering so many different people and cultures made me so intrigued by it, and I thought it would be a great thing to deepen my understanding about. So after I returned, I went to the university. I did my BA at Ben-Gurion University at Be'er Sheva. I lived 3 years in Be'er Sheva in the desert, kind of a studential bubble, they call it. All students live a walking distance from the university, a great community of students. So I studied sociology and anthropology, and I combined it with management. And after 3 years, I decided to proceed my school and registered to the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And I got my MBA there, where I specialize in human resource and organizational development. Going back to the Army, speaking about things that I have gained from serving, I got to know this profession that's called organizational development or consultant, and I decided this is what I want to do. I want to work with organization and help them improve. So this is why I pursued my MBA, and thanks to the IDF, I got to know this profession. And of course, you cannot only have fun, right? And go and travel and have fun as a student. There's a time when you have to go and do your grown-up job. So after I finished my degree at Ben Gurion and during my second degree at the Hebrew University, I started working at HR field. So I worked for the Israeli Scouts. So me and Leo go way back. No, not really. But I did work with her supervisors. I was at the HR department of the Hebrew Scouts, and then I worked for Deloitte in Israel at HR. And finally, I worked for a company called the Institute for Quality Leadership, where I developed leadership programs for managers, worked with different big companies like Microsoft, Intel, and so on, where we developed leadership programs for their managers. all around the world. And then basically COVID, where I had to take a time off from work and decided to pivot my career and come here. So I applied for the Shlichut, and fortunately enough, I got accepted to work for the Jewish agency and come here. Basically, COVID, being isolated in our own capsule, me and my wife and my son, being away from our, families and friends for so long, made me realize I want to work on that human connection. I want to work inside a community. I want to work on creating connections because I felt COVID was such a big blow, I would say, to the, our life harmony. And I thought that will be a great opportunity for me to try to implement things I've learned throughout the years working with people and bring it here, combining with all the Zionistic atmosphere that I've gained throughout the years and trying to implement it here. And as the guy here said before, we have families, right? So we cannot ignore them. So in the meantime of all my life, I got to know my wife while I was a BA student. We got married and we have our son, 2.5 years old, Iftach. So that's quite an experience to become a father. And actually, I was a full-time dad during the pandemic. So I didn't put it in my grown-up job, but that's definitely the hardest work I've ever done. I'm sure some of you can relate. Yeah, I've been almost one year and a half with him at home. My wife is a nurse, so she worked extra hours during the pandemic. So it was me and him most of the time. And it was challenging, but very rewarding, I would say. So just to maybe show you how this Israeli checklist is very much a thing and not something I made up, I would like to share with you a short video.
Son, we're grabbing burgers for dinner if you're interested.
I'm vegan.
Okay, everyone can see the clip.
עשיתי.
I'll stop sharing and I share it again. Second. Yeah. 1 second. Okay.
מה זה שירתי? עשיתי צבא! טירונות בשבטה, משם ג'נין, אחר כך חתמר ציון, נעלין, שמירות עם הנחל, אימון בגולן, אחר כך עשיתי גם קורס מפקדים. עשיתי פטרול עם אגף, עשיתי שמירות 8-8 בקו, עשיתי קפה שחבל על הזמן, שחור, חזק, להתעורר במערב. עשיתי מעצר בחברון, עשיתי אחת מלחמת לבנון, כשעשיתי קצינה בבאר שבע בבית החייל, אז אמרו תעשה כבר קצת קבע, חבל, איך המ"פ עשה לי? עשית פה חייל. אבל וואלה, אני לא רציתי, אמרתי לא קבע ולא נעליים, אני את שלי? מה זה טיילתי? עשיתי את הודו, בצפון עשיתי כמעט את הכל, דרמסלה מנה לי ואין על כסול, אבל אז קצת נמאס לי, עשיתי פרסן וברבה לי, עשיתי את הטרק במדבר, 3 ימים, 2 לילות אופנועים, אחר כך עשיתי קשמיר ונגמר. נשאר רק לעשות הדרום, עשיתי עצירה ברג'סטן, קניות הכי זולות, עשיתי משם לגואה בבומבי עוד חודש, לפעלו למרום בקצתם ממיציתי, אני את שלי? מה זה השתמשתי? עשיתי סמים! ירוק! חום! לא סמים קשים! שחטות, ג'וינטים, פייסלים, ספליפים, העפתי גפיים, הפלתי ראשים, עשיתי את הקוקה וקצת חגיגת, רק מעפנו שורות, לא בלעתי, הסנפתי, ו-MD עשיתי פעם אחת, אבל לא נפתח, אז וואלה, לא אהבתי, קוק פרסי לא עשיתי! למה אומרים שאתה נגנב? אבל שפיץ טריפ אסיד, יענו בול, זה כן עשיתי, אבל עזוב אותך עכשיו. עכשיו רק רוצה לעשות לביתי, לעשות שמות, לעשות עסקים, לעשות המכה, לעשות קייקים, רוצה לעשות חיים, אבל גם רוצה לעשות חושבים, לעשות תשובה, לעשות נפשות, לעשות אהבה, לעשות ילדים, לעשות מה שגבר צריך לעשות.
Okay, so that was the story of my life, kinda, through this song. So this song is performed by Israeli artists and kind of trying to showcase just what I talked about for the last 10 or so minutes, the Israeli checklist, and how after you're doing all those stops in the way, you're getting to the point where you need to be a grown-up and be part of the Israeli society. Let me share my screen again with the presentation for one last slide. Okay, so after talking about myself, I'll just go through about our program, and then we'll open up for discussion and questions, of course. So this program is something that was initiated by Adath Israel. They approached us and asked for some kind of Israeli programming, and me and the Chaverim gathered and thought, what can be interesting? What can be new, up-to-date information about the Israeli society? So we gathered and came up with different topics that we thought might interest you around the Israeli society, stuff like pop culture and feminism and the military and technology and discrimination and aliyah. We will meet once a month talking about all those interesting topics in this format, where we will present to you our perspective around those topics, and then obviously open it for conversation. The purpose of these meetings they're not lectures, but we are talking about it. So for that, we need you as an active participants. So I encourage you to join us and come with questions and comments. That will be awesome and fruitful. And obviously, you have your contact information, both email and Facebook. We're trying to be very communicative through those social media. So please join us there to get more information and contact with us. And that's it, I think, about the three of us. It's your turn now to hit us with some hard questions or just nice questions, whatever you choose. Yeah, thank you. Relatively the first one.
So I'll ask a question. First of all, thank you for participating and sharing your own personal past and how you came to be shlichim in our community. And your biggest fans, I think, are on this call. So we are grateful that you are here. I'd like to hear a little bit about now that you've been here about 4 or 5 months. I'd like to hear a little bit about what you're doing in our community, also your perspective. And I'd particularly be interested hearing about what kinds of conversations you may have had around Israel with community members, both Jewish and non-Jewish, if that's applicable.
Want to start?
I could go first. So the question had a few parts. First of all, what we do. So I could speak in behalf of me and Nitzan that we've been teaching in Rockhorn in the Jewish Day School several times a week. We're visiting the JCC for after crew with the kids, some Jewish, some not. And we also started, as for last week and going forward for the next few months, with kindergarten kids at the JCC as well. On top of that, we've been working with Ish. We had a really successful project last Hanukkah for the Global Party for basically any Jewish teen in Cincinnati. We had Reform, conservative, and even a few Orthodox Jewish teens and a lot of Israelis. That was great, and we had so much fun doing that. I think Nitzan can continue me about our work, but I could just say about conversation with different people in the community. I could say that for people who know a bit more about Israel, there are some more deep conversations regarding my opinions about IDF and about Israel, and even how does a Jewish person that living miles and miles away from Israel can get connected. And these are some really interesting conversations. And I could also say that I have a few non-Jewish friends that, you know, they knew Israel existed. They didn't know nothing about it. So from hearing my experiences and growing up and pictures of me traveling in different places, like some of them were like, you know what, I'm going to put Israel on my bucket list to travel. So it's really nice to get Israel, for people who know nothing about, to get them know a bit better and get interested in it, and let people who have knowledge but not a lot of it, hey, why won't you dig in more? Like, I'm here as a resource. Come and ask whatever you want. So I think that is a big part of what we do, and it's an incredible part. And if Nitzan want to continue with me about other stuff that we do during the week.
Sure. So Leo didn't add, but we take part in a lot of youth movements events. As I showed in my presentation, we were on BBYO convention. It was we went there 2 times with USY and the different youth movements. We went to Hillel a few times in UC and once at Miami University. And Leo covered most of the things, but I see, I'm not sure if I can describe it like that, but I see myself like enjoying from my work like 24/7, because even if I'm talking with my host family or like my friends about Israel, about myself, I see that as kind of my work. And it's connected to the other question. And people ask me like, even like, what do you want to learn on the like at school? And I said, I have no idea. I have like 4 years to think about it. And then they realize that I have 3 years of serving. And then they ask me questions about the army and about a lot of things that really interested them, because it's a different, like, and there is a gap between the checklist that Israelis doing and Americans doing. And even like one of the students at UC asked me one day, like, what's my opinion about the new government in Israel? And it's like, everything is like connection to each other. And like, I think a lot of students basically at UC or like high schoolers, they seeing us as someone who know something different from the news here. Someone outside that have more than one resource to get information and experience in his own body or what the news talking about, if it's the wars, if it's like all the complicated situation in Israel. So I think that's what really interesting the students, like people who really like get this life in their own life. I will call it like that. And Jordan?
So yeah, my work is similar but different. I would say different target audience. I work more with I would say young adults and above. Working right now on creating our 2022 year-long program, which will have different components. so the Israel and the Israel Center at the Federation focuses on, I would say, three different parts. One is the programming for the community, like this program that we're doing right now to bring Israel here. The other one is engagement, so try to engage between Cincinnatians and Israelis in a more direct way. So we are working on several programs now that will hopefully take part in the upcoming month to engage Cincinnatians and Israelis. And under that, I will say that we are trying to better integrate the Israelis who lives here in Cincinnati with the Jewish community here. There are lots of Israelis here, like hundreds of them. And as far as I know, they are kind of in their own bubble. So what better way to engage between Israelis and Cincinnatians, but with, you know, the Israelis who already live here. So that's another goal for this year, I would say. And the last thing is you know, the allocation of the gifts that the community here is doing or giving to Israel and allocated to different organizations in the in Israel. So that's like the three major components of the job. I will say that it's very diverse, and the conversation that I have with people, you know, I was here for a week in June, kind of an orientation week, and I was bombarded with very political and kind of conflict-related questions and conversations, and I was sure my whole talk is going to be around that. But I have to say, ever since I came here, those issues didn't come up so much, and I think maybe related to the fact that in June, it was the last, hopefully last for the upcoming year's last election in Israel. It was in the same time, so people were really interested about that. And as of right now, Israel has a government which is very, I would say, balanced with the right and left, which represent more parts of society than it used to have. So there's more like quiet that comes from there, not so much noise. And I think it resonates here with the community, maybe. I don't know. That's just an assumption. So I think people are, and you know, talking about non-Jews, Barb. So even when I travel a little bit here in the United States, and even here, people are just interested about Israel. And you know, if they're Christians, you know, suddenly say they're talking about the places that they are important to them, like the Jordan River and Nazareth and Jerusalem, obviously, and Bethlehem, and they're asking about that. How big is the Jordan River? That was a question that someone asked me. You know, when you think about the Jordan River in the Bible, it sounds like, you know, and you tell them, it's like maybe 1/4 of the Ohio River. I don't know, something very small. Not that impressive in American standards anyway. So I feel like that the non-Jews, I have a Christian member that just left. So she told me, oh, we're going to do a church group tour to Israel next year. And it's all about that. I don't know. So it's funny because it seems like Israel is she has much more meaning than other places, definitely compared to its size. So if I was, I don't know, a representative from Belgium, I don't think people would know so much about Belgium. But when you say Israel, it doesn't matter if they're Jews or Christians, Israel strike them in a very personal, maybe emotional point in themselves, and always arouse questions and conversations. So yeah, I guess that's it about that. Someone wrote something in the chat I saw. Let's see.
Yeah. Sean, do you have those questions?
I'm pulling them up.
Okay.
Chloe, I think, did you check that or not?
Someone asked about the.
Quick. Hold on.
I did.
Or
I'm
Chloe?
posting. There are several questions here.
Yeah, there's a few of them in there. Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess the first one she put in there, Yarden, Please talk about Israel's handling of COVID. Enough tests? Are your schools open? Is masking and proof of vaccine required? When will the next group get the 4th shot? We'll start with that one.
Oh, wow. So to answer that really up to date, I had to read the newspaper this morning. I would say, as much as I'm trying to stay up to date with what's going on in Israel, it's hectic. It's like every 2 days there are different regulation and different instructions from the government. And this morning I've read that inside the government, ministers are saying that they're kind of lost the public already with all the conflicted instructions and the inconsistent policy that the Israeli government is dictating right now. So I'll try to wait, I'll open it, the list of the specific questions. Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course.
So I don't know how much that would be interested or relevant, but I check those things almost every day because we're going home in a month or so for our redoing the visas. I would say about the first shot, I know that people 60 and above, if I'm not mistaken,
Right.
are either start getting it or getting it next week. About enough tests, no. That's why they did a whole new thing. When I was in high school, what we did for the past 2 years was just go and take a PCR test, but because currently they don't have enough PCRs, they're saying if you have symptoms, get an antigen home test, and then if you got positive, come and do a PCR test. But if you haven't got any positive result on a home test, don't come and do PCR because we don't have enough for everybody. About enough tests, our schools are open. From what I know, yeah, it really depends even on schools, because I know that if they're like 50 and above % of vaccinated students, they have one way of capsules, and if they have less, then it really depends on the ages, the amount of vaccinated people, and how many teachers the school have for different capsules. Is masking and pre-vaccine requires? Yeah. So it's different, like if you had COVID and how many shots you had, but basically if you didn't have any shots and you never had COVID, there are things you're not allowed to. Like you can go to a restaurant, but you can't sit in an indoor space. You can sit in tables outside. Most Israeli restaurants have it anyway because it's a warm country. Also movie theaters and stuff like that, you can go to open theater, not a closed one. And masking is mandatory from what I know indoors. It was mandatory outdoors, but I don't think it's mandatory now. Is former Prime Minister Netanyahu is still active?
That's not COVID related.
Yeah, like generally I think he is. I don't know if he's any active regarding COVID. When he was the Prime Minister, he was obviously very active about it.
I will say something about COVID that it's not really in the question, but I think will concern many of you, is Israeli open for tourism. And they decided to open Israel back to tourism because they understand that there's no point to close the gates when everyone in Israel is already, can get the new variant from their neighbors. So up until a week ago, United States was in the red list. There's now no red list. So if you're interested in going to Israel, you can do that as long as you're vaccinated, I think. But Israel for now is open for tourism. But just, the flight won't get canceled. I've heard a lot of flights get canceled right now, but other than that, I think you can go. About Bibi, yeah, he heads of the opposition right now in Israel. You obviously hear a lot less about him, but I can say about the opposition that there are committees in the Knesset that traditionally belongs to the opposition, and they haven't been formed yet because the opposition doesn't want to play along with them being in opposition and form those committees, for example. So they're trying to do hard life for the coalition, which is fine, but in the way they are kind of putting things in the will of the entire Knesset, which is a very important institute, obviously, for the state. Moving along, what is something about Israel or Israeli you miss that you didn't expect to miss? Oh, wow.
I can start if you want.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't know if I didn't think that I would miss it, but I never like thought about it when I was in Israel. I can say now that like if I'm thinking backwards, I really like missing to the kind of exciting that I saw soldier in the street and like trying to figure out which unit he is and like which kind of weapon he have and like all the subject about like that every street that you will go, no matter where you will be, you will like see a soldier and like you can talk with them and they are not scary and like so I think here like I kind of like need to in my feeling like to save distance from the soldiers and talk with them in one way and with my friends in another way. I don't think like between like the Israeli soldiers and like I would call it people who are not in the army, there is like the distance language or something like that. I can say when I went like with the train in Israel to Tel Aviv or something else, and the soldier came to sit next to me, I would like talk with him and like I get a lot of knowledge and like I really inspired by them. And I think here it's something that I cannot get that easily as Israel. So this is something that like now I can see this effect and like something that I really like was important to me or really affect on my life.
I will say that Israel is very known for that's something I never thought I would miss. It's very flexible, I will say, flexible mindset of people. Rules are not really rules. You know, you kind of change or shape the things the way you want to do it. It's much more flexible, I would say. It's a very nice word. I can use the more harsh words, but I never thought I will miss that. It has its disadvantages, but coming here, America is much more organized, much more structured. When you're talking, for example, for a representative for a clothing company or whatever, customer service, everything is by the book, everything, and you cannot bypass anything. And if you want to, sorry, that it is what it is, right? And sometimes it can be very frustrating. So in Israel, you can manage your way a lot of times. So I thought it was a very, very bad thing. But now I kind of miss that, I think. So that's something I didn't think I would miss too.
I could say that regarding to Israel is the spontaneous. We're spontaneous people. I could have a free weekend, decide, you know what, let's go there, let's do this, let's do that. I can call a friend, be like, hey, do you have a few hours? I don't know, let's drive somewhere in the north. Like Israelis are way more spontaneous with the way they work, the way they think, and the way they manage their day. And here I have a schedule. And it's really it's interesting, but I think that I missed the fact that I could be more spontaneous. And about Israel itself, I could say that as growing up in Netanya, which I don't know how many of you visited, but we have three of the most pretty beaches in Israel, missing the sea. Like I didn't even understood how significant that has been to my life, going once a week, once in 2 weeks, just sitting, watching the waves, and the fact that here you have a river and not an ocean. It's yeah, so it's a big change that I miss my beach basically. So you know what would be the first place for me to visit when I'm going home.
Okay, now vice versa. What will miss when you go back to Israel? I would say the American manners, the way people drive. I don't know. I've been 1 week in Miami, and it felt like in Israel. It feels awful. I was like telling my wife, "Oh my God, I miss Cincinnati. Look how people drive here. It's crazy. It's insane to say Birkat HaGomel each time I get off the car." And people here are so courteous and easy. That's wonderful. It's so hectic in Israel. I definitely miss that, I think.
Did you drive the Ohio streets this week?
Yeah, why? The Ohio.
Oh, they were crazy trying to
they
get
were.
into the shul this week. I took my life in my hands.
I could say I'll miss the easy and peaceful environment, because Israel, we're a lot of time in a rush. Like that is something that is really a character of Israel, is I think, being in a rush and always trying to get more done in less time. And here you feel calm, like no one is chasing you, no one is rushing you. You can do it in a day, you can do it in a week. And the fact that I think it's like I see it as something that is a really American cultural. You don't rush anything. You'll get to the point that you want to get there, but you'll take the time. Like it's fine if we'll do a project in a month and not a week. And you're fine with it, and you're taking the time, and you want to make sure everything is by the book. In Israel, it's not like it, and sometimes I wish it were, because it just makes work a bit more fun.
And I think I will miss to Skyline. No, I'm kidding. I will miss that, but not that the main thing. I think the people, the way that people talk with each other. Like even now, if I'm angry about someone and I want that he will, like being quiet, I will ask, please be quiet. Like I will use this word to make what I want to say more politely and more like good for the entire people, I will call it. So I think the way that people talking, it's something that I taking with me back to Israel. So that's like my answer to this question.
Well, if you really need your skyline fixed, Chloe and I are all about that. We will hook you up. You just say and we'll go.
Do you have connection at Graters as well? Because that's my favorite.
Well, have you been to Aglamisi's?
No, I've heard about their ivory. I haven't tried it yet, but I will. I promise. I know. It's yeah. Okay, how do you compare the ways people spend free time in America versus Israel? People do a lot of different sports here. People golf. Nobody golf in Israel. People play, baseball or football. That doesn't happen in Israel as well. So the sport is very different atmosphere, right, Nitzan?
Yep.
How do they spend time? That's a good question. I know that kind of what Lior said, or Nitzan. I guess it's the way plans are being made. So for example, you need to play 6 months in advance if you go on a vacation. In Israel, it's like a week in advance, even if it's Passover and everything is already booked. But mostly, I think a lot of it is the same. If you have kids, so you do play dates with the kids and you go out to the, one thing I noticed that is different. In Israel, you have a lot of playground for kids in the community sphere. So each neighborhood have few playgrounds which are very big and diverse, and this is the place to go to. Whereas here, I didn't find a lot of those. And if you do, it's very small and not very, and if you have a really good one, like in Summit Park, it's packed with people. So I think it's because people have huge backyards and they don't really need something in the public sphere. But in Israel, we all live in buildings, so we kind of depend on that. So that's different. When I want to take Iftach outside, I need to think about what I'm doing with him. Any difference you noticed?
I think that the main difference is that Israelis like to spend their free time outdoors. Like I don't see any kids playing or like, okay, so in Israel we live in buildings, most of us, and here each house have such big lawn either in their backyard or in front of their house. But I see all those lawns with no kids. Like no one is playing outside, or even like, I don't know, teens centers. In Israel, it's like a really big thing. Each neighborhood or community have a few teen centers for the teens to just come after school instead of doing their homework at home, they'll do it together or they'll play. And I just feel like it doesn't the same here around here. Like people really are fine with staying in their houses, although in Israel we're really into going outside. And you know, for me, like during COVID, spending time with my friends like would be just taking a backpack with a water bottle, a few snacks, and sitting in a field of, I don't know, orange trees or whatever I have around my house. And I don't think any kid here would take a backpack and just go outside his house and find out what he has next to his neighborhood. So I think that is a big difference.
And I connect to what Leo said. I think it's really Israeli to go to national parks and like hiking places and stuff like that, like on Saturdays or vacations. And like here, I feel that it's something special. It's not something that you're doing like every week or like every day. If you have vacation, it's nothing like just on winter break, you're going to travel somewhere or like big vacations and big events it makes from that. And in Israel, it's like kind of piece of cake or like the regular thing that you're doing like once a week or once in 2 weeks.
I see we came to 2 o'clock. We can say a few more minutes. If you have more questions, we'll be happy to answer. But for the ones who need to jump off, it was great seeing you. So thank you for joining us. So we'll move on to the next question about people who want to make Aliyah. What do we tell them? So actually, I've met until now only one couple that wants to do Aliyah. And it was pretty easy. They kind of decided they want to do it because their kid is, she's not a kid, her daughter lives there with their grandkids. But I do think that the most important thing is trying to convey the things that came up right here in these questions that you asked about the differences between Israel and America, because sometimes you think, or you hear about Israel and you say, before I came here, I've heard a lot of things about America and everything was super exciting and great and wonderful. And then you come here and you discover, wait, there are a lot of differences that are not easy to digest, I guess, and that you do need to overcome. And you do need a support group to do that, or a network or someone to be there for you, to help you guide you through the different nuance of the culture and the society. And so I think that for me as a Shaliach, and I didn't speak about it, but part of my job as a Shaliach from the Jewish Agency, I'm responsible for Aliyah here. So whomever in Cincinnati wants to do Aliyah, I'm his contact person, and they need to do it through Nefesh B'Nefesh and the Jewish Agency, two organizations that promote the Aliyah to Israel from North America. And I think that it's really important to sit down and talk about the differences and find out whether this guy, girl, senior, whatever, who wants to move to Israel, does he really understand the differences, and will he have someone to help him there? Because it's a very, very tough, I came here for a short period of time compared to a lifetime, and I have the community to welcome me, and it's still hard. So I don't think about, someone who leaves everything behind for who knows how much time and has no one. We want to people who make Aliyah to make it successful story, and not finding them coming back to their home here in America, wherever, because they failed to integrate into Israeli society. So that's a lot of responsibility, but I guess, this part of the job. I hope I answered the questions. Any more questions from people here that didn't write the questions in advance?
I have a question regarding Aliyah. So as American Jews, many of us has felt a tremendous rise in anti-Semitism in the last several years. And that's something that for most of us, we didn't really experience until very recently. And I'm curious if you've had conversations or people have approached you as American Jews seeing Israel as a refuge, which truthfully, as somebody who is as committed to Israel as I am, never looked at it for my own personal need, but in the more recent years with synagogue bombings and JCC attacks and everything else that has been happening, I think this has entered people's mind. And I'm curious if you've had those kinds of conversations in the community.
So just like you described, I've heard about the synagogue in California, Chabad, that was burned just a few weeks ago. I don't know if you've heard of it, but those attacks happens, and it's frankly it's awful. And for me as an Israeli, it's something that we're not familiar with. Burning synagogues and stuff like that. We're used to rockets from Gaza, but not that. And I do feel people are more concerned about it, and viewing Israel as their safe haven or something like that. And for me personally, I don't want to preach anyone to leave their house, their home, and move to another place. Personally, I don't feel comfortable with that as much as I love Israel. For me personally, I think that's something that needs to come from the other party, not from me. I think that Jews here in America have challenges that are different than the ones we have in Israel, and I think those challenges are getting bigger, maybe worse. I think part of our job as a community is trying to fight anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, that people sometimes think they are not the same, but in my standpoint, being anti-Zionist is being anti-Semitic. And people are not truly comprehend those nuances. They're still separating being Jewish and being Israeli, which is right. It's not the same, but we are tied, even if we want or if we don't want. We are tied, and our destiny in many ways is tied, and we influence each other. And what happens in Israel influence what happened here. So in Israel, there is a war, anti-Semitism rise here, and and vice versa. So this is why I think the Shlichut Institute is very important. This is why the young emissaries are really important, to try and to form the connections and educate. And if you decide to move to Israel to help you do a smooth transition or help you guide you through this process, and maybe provide tools how to combat anti-Semitism, or a lot of times I've heard about people getting comments about their being Jewish or they're supporting Israel, and they don't know how to react, and they don't know what to say. And I consider myself, me and the Chaverim as well, as a resource to help you, to provide you with tools how to manage those conversations. So we are here for all of that as well. Okay, does Israel anticipate more aliyot than in the past because of the anti-Semitism in the US? So we are definitely seeing an increase of aliyah from the United States in the recent years, and the numbers are continue to grow, both here and not only here. Anti-Semitism rising all over, and it's not only about that. I think COVID also had an impact about the willing to live in Israel, the way Israel managed the disease or the pandemic, and not even that, even Israel being a more socialist country with different type of healthcare services. For me, I got my insurance here, but it's really hard if you don't have insurance in America, or it seems like you need to have money to be healthy, and that's something that you never think about when you are in Israeli. Money is not an issue. Yeah, you can have private insurance in Israel and maybe get a faster, appointment, or world famous known doctors. But in the end, if you're not well, you have where to go, and you don't think twice because budget-wise, that's not something that crosses your mind. And I think the pandemic also made a shift in people's minds. So regarding questions, yeah, the numbers are increasing here and worldwide actually. And even during the pandemic, I have to say, thousands of new Olim came, even though the skies were closed, borders were closed. The Jewish Agency was successful to bring thousands of Olim last year.
And I could add to it that in the past few weeks, the government had approved an aliyah for thousands and thousands of people from Ethiopia that considered themselves Jewish. They lived as Jewish, but because everything that happened with their, for example, they were Jewish because their great grandpa was Jewish, but their great grandma converted because they've been hostage and pursued to convert if they want to remain and live in their cities in Ethiopia. And because of that decision, a lot of Olim are coming after years and years living in these camps, waiting to hear back from Israel and waiting to come and do Aliyah. And I visited one of these camps a few years ago, and I was really excited to hear about it because these people have Israelis in their veins. Like it's really unique to see people that are so into Israel and coming and spend their life there, although they never even visited, just because they heard stories from their parents and their great grandparents, and they feel like this is their home. So that is also something that made numbers go way up.
And if you're interested about Aliyah more, you can contact me. There are sessions about Aliyah that the Jewish Agency is having, and like webinars and stuff like that. I can definitely refer you to those. Have you ever experienced any direct anti-Semitism or heard from others? Me personally, no, and I hope it will stay that. I don't know. Chaverim, have you?
I haven't experienced anything. Have several friends that experienced different things during their time here in the US and other places, but so far this community is just great on that matter.
Or heard from others. Not something that happened recently and in person. No. I guess it's, yeah, like Lior said, I think Cincinnati is pretty calm, maybe relatively to other places regarding those issues, and hopefully it will stay that way. Any more questions?
Well, I want to thank you for today. And I also, for those of you who are on this call, I mean, this is a wonderful program that our community offers. And if you have any other ways that you would like to utilize both Yarden and Lior and Nitzan, I think it would be up to you to contact them directly. They're a great resource. And I just also want to mention that on May 18th, Noah Tishby, who is the author of Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth, is coming to Cincinnati, co-sponsored, primarily sponsored by Jewish National Fund, but co-sponsored as well by JCRC and the Federation and Adath Israel. And if you are part of a book club, I strongly encourage you to read this book. It's an amazing book. It's an easy read. And I'm sure Yarden or the Chaverim would be happy to participate in any discussion around this, and come to the breakfast, which is free, on May 18th at the JCC. So I'd like to just put in a little, and if you are interested in having your book club read it, or you know other people who are in book clubs, feel free to contact either me or Nina or Eric Goldstein at Jewish National Fund, and we'll be happy to coordinate that with you. So, but I strongly encourage, and I know that Lior is excited about it because she mentioned that to me a few months ago.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think she's an incredible person, and anyone that could come and hear her would benefit a lot.
Agree. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all. Really appreciate our Shaliach and Chaverim for taking time out of the day. And we look forward to connecting with you next month. Again,
Yeah,
for
we're
the
going to
next
talk about
kickoff
pop
of the
culture.
series. That'll be fun. That'll be a lot of fun. Very
just
cool. Me being a pop culture guy.
Just to know, next month is going to be slightly different hour than the usual ones.
Yes.
It will be 2 or 2:30, I think.
2:30.
On the website, 2:30.
2:30.
Yeah, but then we'll be
Yep.
back on 1 o'clock.
Great. Thank you all. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.